they basically were people who were racist, who wanted to maintain power, and they saw the so-called indigenous people, who they call black, they considered them to be the enemy, and they wanted to do what? Kill them off. So they came up with this secret program called Project Coast. Project Coast. And in this thing, you can watch the whole thing, but these guys are talking about Project Coast, and I want you to take a listen to what he says. Okay?
Allies and was appointed as the managing director of Roodeplaat Research Laboratories.
We could have employed whoever we wish. We could have gone headhunting, recruited the top scientists in the country. We could have put up the best facilities, and we could really be involved in leading and very, very sophisticated science.
I was asked by Dr. Dan Goosen to join the company as head of the microbiology department.
Guidelines were clear from the beginning. It should be products which are preferably not detectable and not traceable.
I was promised good equipment, good facilities, and the best people that money could buy at that stage.
We had in the end over 600 organisms in the culture bank. Not all of them were suitable for biological weapons.
Okay.
But I would say about 20, 30 of those organisms was very, and the classical type of biological weapons.
Okay. 20 or 30 of them were, so he said 600, 20 to 30 were biological weapons. 20 to 30 were biological weapons. And he said, what did he say? That is not traceable or detectable, meaning you can't tell it's man-made. Okay? I want you to hear that one part again. Talked about a mandate.
I was asked by Dr. Dan Goosen to join the company as head of the microbiology department.
Guidelines were clear from the beginning. It should be products which are preferably not detectable and not traceable.
Okay, not detectable, not traceable. Now I want to go to this. You'll see why I'm doing this.
Senator Paul.
Dr. Fauci, we don't know whether the pandemic started in a lab in Wuhan or evolved naturally, but we should want to know. 3 million people have died from this pandemic, and that should cause us to explore all possibilities. Instead, government authorities, self-interested in continuing gain-of-function research, say there's nothing to see here. Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. Juicing up superviruses is not new. Scientists in the U.S. have long known how to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Barrick and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then use this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Think about that for a moment. The SARS virus had a 15% mortality. We're fighting a pandemic that has about a 1% mortality. Can you imagine if a SARS virus that's been juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally? Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute
Do they fund
of
Dr.
Virology.
Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina. not
You don't think
in
inserting
China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That is
You would be
not-
in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So
they
do
write
you still
about it.
support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan
Do you
Virology
support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency and a sub-grant. Do you support the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been
Or
infected.
perhaps it would be
in China.
irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function
maintain
research
that
in
the
China.
disease
You are
arose
saying
naturally.
things that are not correct.
Government defenders of gain-of-function, such as yourself, say that COVID-19 mutations were random and not designed by man. But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrick developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrick named the technique the no-see-em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker in the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature.
Wait a minute. This sounds familiar, guys. Hold on, just a second. Sounds familiar. Hold on.
Are you ready for fun? For the thrill of your favorite rides and the joy of meeting inspiring
Guidelines were clear from the beginning. It should be products which are preferably not detectable and not traceable. Guidelines were clear from the beginning. It should be products which are preferably not detectable and not traceable.
Oh, okay.
Nature. Or the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature. Government authorities in the U.S., including yourself, unequivocally deny that COVID-19 could have escaped a lab. But even Dr. Shi in Wuhan wasn't so sure. According to Nicholas Baker, Dr. Shi wondered, could this new virus have come from her own laboratory? She checked her records frantically and found no matches. That really took a load off my mind, she said. I had not slept for days. The director of the gain-of-function research in Wuhan couldn't sleep because she was terrified that it might be in her lab. Dr. Barrick, an advocate of gain-of-function research, admits the main problem that the Institute of Virology has is the outbreak occurred in close proximity. What are the odds? Barrick responded, could you rule out a laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. Will you, in front of this group, categorically say that the COVID-19 could not have occurred through serial passage in a laboratory?
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation.
He's like, what the Chinese may have done. He's basically saying that America has 11 labs that do gain-of-function research. He's admitting that. Gain-of-function research specifically is research that does what? It allows what can't naturally occur to occur by man's intervention, which does what? Transfers a virus from an animal to a human and then gets gain of function in the sense that what? It becomes more virulent, more deadly. That's called a biological weapon. So he's admitting that America has 11 labs that just do that. Create biological weapons that create viruses that are deadly, that don't naturally occur. Okay? Now, we're supposed to believe that it just is happenstance that he was managing a program with a person in China who's also have known to be working on gain of function, but he's saying, well, our grant wasn't supposed to really do that. It's a coincidence that we had a cover story that was a bat at a wet market, and it's just a coincidence that this person took the spike protein from a bat and in their actual Wuhan laboratory, which ended up, quote unquote, escaping. And it just so happens while I was managing the program, and it was under my tutelage that they were funding this program in Wuhan, where the virus supposedly escaped, that put the world on lockdown and tell everybody they need to force to take vaccines and give up their rights. It just is coincidence that I also am the person who is now advisor to the president, who's handling and managing how we react to the virus. The no-see virus, no-seeum virus. And it's not, you guys don't see this as treason? You don't see that? Honestly, you don't see that. You don't see, like, I really want to know who doesn't. Let me know in in the comments section if you believe Dr. Fauci, and let me know what you think. I really want to know what you think in the comment section. Do you think this was some accident that happened, that there's nothing nefarious here? Or do you think we got people in our midst who their whole point is to be globalists who are trying to bring down American fake prophecy, and they got to do it, guys. Think about it. Americans have guns. They don't want to destroy the infrastructure. Bill Gates has been complaining about what? Overpopulation. He's talking about overpopulation and talking about reducing the carbon footprint. You think Bill Gates lives in a one person house, especially now that he's getting his so-called divorce? I mean, he should be in a studio, right? Because he doesn't want to have a large. But how can a man who's a billionaire, who's obviously greedy and willing to hoard all this money to himself, be a charitable, altruistic person? He just happens to be the guy who's developing the technology that's supposedly going to track and trace and help people make sure everyone's actually taking the so-called vaccine. And they said that the epicenter for this thing where people are going to die most, they said it seems to be in Africa and India right now. I really, really want to know what you guys think. Because, people have been warning about this. I mean, I've been giving you the gospel and letting you know, look, at the end of the day, people are going to perish one way or another in the flesh. But if you believe the gospel, you'll never perish. Gospel being that, look, God is a spirit who comes in the likeness of sinful flesh. It's God in me that does to do into will of his good pleasure. So God comes to you in the likeness of sinful flesh, and you don't know what person walking around has the spirit of God in them. That's why you have to listen today. If you hear his voice, harden not your heart. Because he can come in the likeness of me, looking like anyone. And we're saying God is a spirit. And then his name is Jesus. But there's the mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, who's of the flesh of man, but the flesh of man is not God. The reason they tried to do the hypostatic union and combine the flesh of man is because they want to say, well, it's the flesh, and now they're going to say, well, we see Jesus was a Jew, and then they're going to say, well, Jesus was a Jew, and Jew is a race, and in the Jewish race, where you can see what color they do the nativity scenes, and you can see the color of Netanyahu, and you're going to say, well, I didn't know Jew was a race. I thought it was a belief. I thought it was a faith. And they're saying, no, there's a secular Jew, so it's not a faith. They say it's a royal bloodline from the line of David. And it just so happens that they were going around conquering under manifest destiny, papal bulls, whatever you want to call it, and now they got what they're going on called Zionism. This is their final play. And so they have to fake Bible prophecy. That's their faking Bible. They're trying to say that the kingdom is of this world and all that kind of stuff. And they say that there's a Jewish race. So God has a chosen race. They don't tell you about British Israelism and how that ties into the Balfour Declaration and colonization. They just tell you, oh, believe it, believe it, believe it. No, men are willing to kill people who look like themselves so that they can justify war. They do it all the time. World War II, they killed people to justify colonization. 9/11, they killed people to justify these wars in the Middle East. And they will continue to kill people, and they will continue to fake prophecy, because what they've done is they've front-loaded in your brain They tell you what's going to happen before it happens. But they're doing that so that they can give you a false context and cloud your interpretation of what actually happened. And now what's going on is, oops, you gave us this front story about a bat in the wet market in Wuhan, and oops, you forgot to tell us about your ties to the research, to the medical doctor who worked on gain of function in Wuhan. And now you're admitting that you have gain of function laboratories in America that do exactly what they're talking about, creating deadly viruses that are non-detectable and try to be non-traceable. The problem is you're not God and word gets out. The problem is you got caught in your own lie. At a bare minimum, they would say you cannot be ahead of any program given your connection. At a bare minimum.
Of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain of function research to be conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
He's saying they do gain of function. He says, well, we didn't fund it to be conducted. Meaning he's trying to say, I don't know what they did in China. He's basically trying to distance himself. He's trying to throw the Chinese under the bus. He's trying to throw the Chinese lab under the bus because you can't let it be treason. You can't let it be, actually, we're some double dealing, double crossing SLBs here. And we're working for a globalist agenda. And we're trying to get the world under subjection under this lockdown. And we're willing to genocide a bunch of people and then profit off the back end by forcing them to take a vaccine, which can be a weapon in of itself, like in Project Coast, where they gave vaccine that gave people AIDS. And it's non-traceable, non-detectable, and it's made to seem like it was naturally occurring. Non-traceable. Why would you work on such a weapon, guys? To work on a weapon where it's non-traceable, and to do that in secret, isn't that called a conspiracy? Well, he's now admitting to you that there's a conspiracy to kill people with, you don't create a bioweapon. Why'd you do it? Oh, for laughs and giggles. That's why we do it. So you're spending all this money for nothing? We know how much the government loves money, how rich people hoard money. We know what Wall Street's all about. So why would you be investing in biological wars? You're trying to get a return on investment. You're trying to get return on investment. So what's your return on investment from creating a biological weapon that's not detectable and not traceable? And of course you would release it from a foreign nation. You wouldn't release it from your own nation. And then you'd, of course, throw them under the bus. The only problem is you didn't tell us about your link.
Supported in the U.S. We have 11 labs doing it, and you have allowed it here. We have a committee to do it, but the committee has granted every exemption. You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing super viruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States. And we should be very careful to investigate where this virus came from.
I fully agree that you should investigate where the virus came from. But again, we have not funded gain of function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times you say it.
There was research. There was research done with Dr. Shi and Dr. Barrick. They have collaborated on gain of function research where they enhanced the SARS virus to infect human airway cells, and they did it by merging a new spike protein on it. That is gain of function. That was joint research between the Wuhan Institute and Dr. Barrick. You can't deny it.
Senator Paul.
You can't deny it. So guys, don't get these people. Some of these people, you talk to them, and they just don't want their bubble burst. They worship America. They worship whatever it is. They don't want to admit that there's treason because they're like, I just don't want to admit it. Some of these people just don't want to admit that they've been fooled. It's like I can't admit I've been fooled because if I admit I've been fooled, then it's basically pride. It's basically anyone who doesn't want to admit at this point that they've been tricked and duped, and that there's just a total conspiracy and an agenda. They're just proudful and they don't want to admit that they've been fooled. Because and think about it, all these schools around the nation and medical schools and all this kind of stuff, they've been duped. All these people have been duped, right? A virus gain of function non-detectable that they call the no-seum virus. No-seum mean you can't detect it, but potent and deadly. In the other video, the guy talks about how he had all these viruses and at least 20 of them can be classified as bioweapons. And they were also, he said the policy or the mandate was that they're non-traceable and non-detectable.
Rob, when you say you've been living Atkins for years, does that mean you're dieting all?
Guidelines were clear from the beginning. It should be products which are preferably not detectable and not traceable.
Oh, I was promised good equipment, good facilities, and the best people that money could buy at that stage.
We had in the end over 600 organisms in the culture bank. Not all of them were suitable for biological weapons, but I would say about 20, 30 of those organisms was very, and the classical type of biological weapons.
So I'm just gonna let it go at that, guys. So I did this because there's this guy, I was on YouTube, and there's this guy who's like, I tell him about Project Coast and I tell him about these things, and of course they just dismiss you. Of course, I tell people in real life things, and you tell them stuff and they dismiss you. So these are people who basically just have confidence in men, and it says put no confidence in men. Why do you guys think that there's supposed to be this separation of so-called duties, and like if you work in accounting and they're supposed to have like controls and things where you make sure that not one person handles all the money, and the person who's doing the receivables and the payables doesn't manage all the checks and all this kind of stuff, because if one person has too much centralized control, they can hide and manipulate the books, and that's how you get these schemes where people steal from corporations. So that's why they're like, we must have segregation of duties, right? Make sure that people go on vacation, because if they don't ever go on vacations, it's because they're afraid that their Ponzi scheme will fall up, or their theft will get detected if somebody else steps into that role. So you rotate people in different roles. That's the point of rotating people through companies, right? To different positions, especially handling money. So you're not supposed to, we're not supposed to have this confidence and trust. That's why we ask for certificates and training and education, and did you get your hours in and all that. That's all built on the fact that we know that there's a certain level we have to trust that you don't get on the plane drunk, but at the same time we're saying, no, I need some proof that you're an actual pilot, and that's what that pilot uniform represents, that you've got the training and the this and the that. And that's why people try to disarm you by having things like PhDs and being called Dr. Fauci. Oh, this is a not-for-profit. But then you find out the not-for-profit is working in collaboration with a laboratory that works on biological weapons. They do gain of weapons research, which the only purpose of gain of functional research is to just basically create more deadly viruses that would naturally occur in nature that aren't detectable, but more potent and deadly. I'm gonna let it go. I feel like it's just so obvious. I don't need to keep going on about it.